11. Application. Rule 11 says the section applies to vessels. Rule 12. Sailing vessels. When two sailing vessels are approaching each other, Rule 12 specifies what action should be taken. To view the rule provisions, click the button below. Rule 12 states that the port tack gives way to the starboard tack, and, on the same tack, the windward vessel yields to the leeward vessel. Here are some important reminders to consider in implementing Rule 12. To achieve a safe passing distance, a sailing vessel must act quickly and decisively. The other vessel must attempt to maintain her course and speed at first, but wind changes may make this difficult. Rule 12 does not apply if one of the vessels under sail also uses propelling machinery, because such a vessel is considered a power-driven vessel. In sailing vessels, the wind plays an important role in determining which vessel should take the avoiding action. You can learn more about this rule by watching this video.
Assume that two sailing vessels encounter wind on opposite sides due to the course they have taken. In this case, the vessel with the wind on the port side must yield. Assume that, because of their course, the two sailing vessels encounter wind on the same side. In this case, the vessel on the windward side must give way to the vessel on the leeward side. Assume that two sailing vessels encounter wind on opposite sides due to the course they have taken. In this case, the vessel with the wind on the port side must yield.
Rule 13. Overtaking. Under Rule 13, the overtaking vessel must retain a safe distance from the vessel it is overtaking to avoid a collision. To view the rule provisions, click the button below. Rule 13 states that always maintain a sufficient distance between your vessel and the vessel you are overtaking to ensure that no interaction between the two vessels occurs. This is also true for vessels in narrow channels. Interaction is more likely to occur when the water depth is shallow and the speed differences between the two vessels are minor. Here are some important reminders to consider in implementing Rule 13. Don't forget, if you are unsure whether you are an overtaking vessel, you must assume and keep clear. Do not pass in close proximity.
Be wary of vessel interaction.
Avoid crossing ahead. Ask yourself, is the ship being pursued aware of your presence? Always assume they don't. Remain vigilant. The following video provides a more detailed explanation of Rule 13, overtaking.
When overtaking, always keep in mind that as per these rule any vessel overtaking any other shall keep out of the way of the vessel being overtaken. Your action and alteration must be made clear and visible so as not to impede the safe passage of the vessel being overtaken. Every subsequent alteration you make must not make you a crossing vessel. By these rule you are not relieved of your duty to keep clear until she is finally passed and clear.
Rule 14, Head-on situation. Rule 14 deals with head-on situations, which only applies to power-driven vessels. To view the rule provisions, click the button below. According to Rule 14a, in contrast to the other rules that deal with staying out of the way, Rule 14 imposes the duty to act on both vessels. Considering Rule 14c that the approaching speed of two vessels on a head-on course is high, the time for action arrives sooner. A precautionary change of course to port at a long distance must be regarded as a normal change not covered by Rule 14. See Rule 8a. And it has the potential to be highly hazardous. There are some important reminders to consider in implementing Rule 14. Pay close attention to the differences between heading and ground course, particularly when using radar or an automatic identification system, AIS. Rule 14 applies if a vessel is ahead and coming the opposite way on an opposite course and is within half a point, 6 or 7 degrees, of either side of the bow. If in doubt, do not assume a crossing situation, but always assume head-on, commonly known as dual action rule. Several collisions have occurred as a result of one vessel changing course to port to increase passing distance and the other vessel turning to starboard.
The next video will explain a head-on situation.
When two power-driven vessels are meeting on reciprocal or nearly reciprocal courses, so as to involve risk of collision, each shall alter her course to starboard so that each shall pass on the port side of the other. Your alteration should be substantial and visible to the meeting vessel, and must be made in ample time so as to avoid risk of collision. When in doubt as to whether such a situation exists, you shall assume that it does exist and act accordingly.
Rule 15, Crossing situation. Crossing situations are covered by rule, whereas it only applies to two power-driven vessels crossing.
According to Rule 15.
The right-of-way is given to a vessel crossing from your starboard side. It must use the so-called polite navigation. The other vessel will be watching you closely and anxiously until it is certain you are taking the correct action. Additionally, it is your responsibility to act if you are in a crossing situation between two power-driven vessels with a risk of collision and the other ship is on your starboard side. Keep out of the way of the other vessel and avoid crossing in front of it. Here are some important reminders to keep in mind when implementing Rule 15. First, there must be two power-driven vessels crossing, not head-on or overtaking, and there must be a risk of collision. Second, the vessel with another vessel crossing on her starboard side must give way. Lastly, avoid crossing the bow as the give-way vessel when maneuvering to avoid a collision. Follow these steps to make life easier for both ships. Step 1. Give way early. If you are the giveaway vessel, act as soon as possible so the other vessel is aware of your intentions. Step 2. Avoid crossing ahead by always going to starboard and astern of the other vessel if possible. Step 3. Be considerate and courteous to your traffic companions. You may do this if the other vessel is hampered in any way. Your prompt action will reassure it. Step 4. Maintain a positive attitude, especially if you are unsure. For the last step, don't forget about your engine. You can always use it in addition to your helm. Slowing down will provide both ships with more time and space.
A video is provided to help you understand how Rule 15 is applied.
When two power-driven vessels are crossing so as to involve risk of collision, the vessel, which has the other on her own starboard side, shall keep out of the way and shall, if the circumstances of the case admit, avoid crossing ahead of the other vessel.
Rule 16. Action by giveaway vessel. Rule 16 specifies the action to be taken by the giveaway vessel. The rule also reinforces Rule 8 by reminding us to avoid a close quarters situation in advance. Here are some important reminders to keep in mind when implementing Rule 16. The closest point of approach, CPA, and time to closest point of approach, TCPA, must be calculated, and any action taken must be completed in a timely manner. It should be a bold alteration in course or speed, so that the other vessel is well aware that you are taking action to avoid the close quarters situation. And do not wait until the last minute, as this may send a false signal to the other vessel that you are doing nothing. As a result, he may take action, which may result in confusion. Here are some checklists for happy sailing. Alter early and adequately enough to show the other vessel clearly. Confirm your action has the desired effect by checking the increase in the CPA on the radar. Following Rule 16 makes life easier for all vessels. If the watchkeeper on the other vessel is pleased with the situation and your action, he or she is less likely to do anything unexpected. Treat other vessels in the same way that you would like to be treated. Use courtesy and common sense when sailing.
The following video explains the action of the giveaway vessel.
Every vessel which is directed to keep out of the way of another vessel shall, so far as possible, take early and substantial action to keep well clear. Alteration should be big enough to be visible so as to make clear your intention to the other vessel.
Rule 17. Action by stand-on vessel. Rule 17 addresses the stand-on vessel's actions, including the provision that the stand-on vessel may take action to avoid collision by her own maneuver as soon as it becomes clear that the vessel required to keep out of the way is not taking appropriate action. To view the rule provisions, click the button below. Rule 17 is divided into 3 stages, each of which must be identified and evaluated. Rule 17, A, I, states that when you are the stand-on vessel, you must maintain your course and speed. You must not do anything unexpected. Rule 17, A, 2, states that you may take your own action to avoid a collision as soon as it becomes apparent that the giveaway vessel is not taking appropriate action. Rule 17, B, states that if a collision cannot be avoided solely by the giveaway vessel, you must take the best action possible to avoid colliding. An additional note is to ensure that your action under Rule 17, B, must be taken in time to avoid a collision, so don't put it off too long.
The stand-on vessel
Is not required to act, but it should monitor the situation and take appropriate action. It should also take some positive action and, if necessary, improve the situation. According to Rule 17C, recommendations for actions to be taken if a crossing vessel on your port side fails to follow the rules. You should avoid altering course to port in this situation. Among the possible actions are: turn to starboard to follow the other vessel's path. Keep an eye on the other vessel, and if she continues on her course, you have the option of slowing down or making a full turn. Make a full turn to starboard. Vessels with a small turning circle may consider stopping, as this may have the same effect as a turn to starboard. Drawbacks of a full turn include loss of speed and possible loss of orientation. Here are some important reminders to keep in mind when implementing Rule 17. Maintain your current course and speed. May alter course and speed if it becomes clear that the give-way is not acting. When you do act, avoid turning to port for a vessel on your port side whenever possible. Shall act when everything the give-way vessel can do to avoid collision is insufficient. You are already in an emergency. Do something right now. The following media illustrates the action by stand-on vessel.
Where one of two vessels is to keep out of the way, the other shall keep her course and speed. When, from any cause, the vessel required to keep her course and speed finds herself so close that collision cannot be avoided by the action of the give-way vessel alone, she shall take such action as will best aid to avoid collision.
Rule 18, responsibilities between vessels. This rule sets the priorities for special classes of vessels, whereas those with the most maneuverability give way to those with less. To view the rule provisions, click the button below. According to Rule 18. 18C, as far as possible, sometimes fishing vessels are unable to take appropriate action to avoid a collision. 18D, a vessel constrained by her draft and displaying the signals in Rule 28 has no rights over a vessel not under command or restricted in her ability to maneuver, such as a sailing vessel or a fishing vessel that is restricted in her ability to maneuver. Other vessels must account for the restrictions on deep draft vessels. As we understand and comply with the rules, the above are to be remembered at all times and applied when meeting any of the named types of vessels. Need not apply the above rule if the situation is within a TSS or a narrow channel, or if an overtaking situation arises. And, in the case of TSS and overtaking, rules number 10 and 13 would take precedence above Rule 18. Here are some important reminders to keep in mind when implementing Rule 18. The primary goal of this rule is for vessels to recognize their position and restrictions to avoid complications, which are described based on type or restriction in maneuverability. As a result, it offers simple guidance as to who shall give way. Please keep in mind that this rule is found in Section 2, Conduct of Vessels in Sight of One Another. As a result, it is not in any condition of visibility, even though being in sight of one another and restricted visibility are both parts of any condition of visibility. And it specifies who must stay out of the way, except where Rules 9, 10, and 13 specify otherwise. It means that the three rules take precedence over the type of vessel or the circumstances of the case. The following illustration shows the order of priority of vessels or the privileges each vessel has over the other. The degree of responsibility depends on the ability of a vessel to take avoiding actions. The responsibility between vessels is explained in the following media.
Except for narrow channels, traffic separation schemes, and overtaking, Rule 18 applies. When operating on the water's surface, a power-driven vessel and wing-in-ground vessel must keep clear of the vessel not in command. It should keep a safe distance from the vessel restricted in her ability to maneuver. It should also keep a safe distance from the fishing vessel and sailing vessel. A sailing vessel must keep a safe distance from any vessel that is not under command, any vessel restricted in her ability to maneuver, and any vessel engaged in fishing. When underway, a vessel engaged in fishing must maintain a safe distance from any vessel not under command and any vessel with limited maneuverability. Except for restricted in ability to maneuver vessel and vessels not under command, all other vessels should keep clear of vessels constrained by her draft. A seaplane on the water should keep a safe distance from other vessels and act following the rules.
Provided that matches the descriptions. Steering and Sailing Rules, Section 2, Conduct of Vessels in Sight of One Another. Rule 11 to 18 can be summarized as follows.